Japanese developer Sing is no stranger to novel-style adventures, having been the creative force behind cult favorites Trace Memory and Hotel Dusk. Sing's latest game, again Eye of Providence, closely mimics its predecessor's formula, but a predictable story, laughable presentation, and bland gameplay make this one murder mystery that's best left unsolved. As FBI agent Jonathan Weaver, you're tasked with figuring out the identity of criminal mastermind Providence. The killer is responsible for a series of murders that went unsolved, but when he strikes again 19 years later, the FBI reopens the cold case in an effort to stop Providence before he completes his latest masterpiece. Agent Weaver is the lone survivor of the original crimes, and inexplicably, he has the convenient ability to see into the past, making him the perfect man for the job. The new murders are identical to the originals, and whether the culprit is a copycat or the real deal remains a mystery till the end. While it has all the key ingredients of a good murder mystery, the problem is that the story just isn't that interesting. There's no real hook until several hours into the plot, and even then, it never drives you to the edge of your seat, wondering what'll happen next. On top of this, the lead character's dialogue sounds awkward and hardly resembles a conversation between actual people. They seem more like people living in a bubble and capable of displaying genuine emotion. This also applies to the rest of the cast. Bad dialogue and characterization are the norm here. Considering how good Sing's stories have been in the past, the poor effort is practically criminal. Again is billed as an interactive crime novel, allowing players to engage in lengthy conversations with numerous NPCs and get hands-on with the investigation at each crime scene. The game's biggest flaw is that the bulk of the experience involves reading long bouts of exposition, sprinkled with a few meager segments of actual detective work. It all feels too passive. You'll find it hard to muster the motivation to push forward with the dry and predictable plot. The portions of the game that actually involve some degree of interaction pale in comparison to those found in previous Sing games, especially Hotel Dusk. Jonathan's ability to see both the past and present of any crime scene is a nice touch, but most puzzles boil down to simply picking up on what's the difference between the two versions. Rather than wanting to spend time analyzing the scene to identify actual evidence, you'll be more inclined to just click random items in a trial-and-error fashion. The same mentality applies to questioning persons of interest. It's frankly just not that much fun. Solving this case will take around 10 or so hours, but that's only if you have the willpower to actually see it through. Like previous Sing games for the DS, again makes good use of both screens, particularly during the crime scene investigations. In these rare instances where you're actually doing something other than reading text, Jonathan triggers his ability to see into the past with an item known as the Eye of Providence. You use both the stylus and face buttons to navigate in a first-person perspective during these situations. Moving around in first person works well for the most part, though looking around with the stylus can be sluggish at times. The rest of the controls are simple enough and work well, even if the mechanics become repetitive. That's because most of your time in a game is spent simply tapping icons on the screen to advance the story. Whether it's moving to a new location or navigating through lines of dialogue, be prepared to give your hand a workout. There just isn't a lot of meaningful interaction here. The overall lack of diversity and creativity makes for one bland game. Even though other games like Hotel Dusk or even Capcom's Ace Attorney series adhere to the same style of interaction, the key difference is that it's actually meaningful in those titles. Everything in Again feels like a chore. Rather than sticking to the rotoscoped visuals found in Hotel Dusk, Again opts for photorealistic imagery with a subtle filter effect. It comes across as a cheap knockoff, and the facial expressions are also incredibly ridiculous. On the other hand, the crime scene segments fare a bit better with a more traditional 3D look, but they're too infrequent to really appreciate. The soundtrack also fails to drum up any type of suspense with its slow-paced melodies, most of which are merely short samples looping over and over. Again lacks almost all of the elements that made Sing's previous games stand out amongst fans and critics alike. This dull, plotting experience isn't worth your time or money. Given the lack of meaningful interactive segments, you're better off just reading an actual thriller.